Hey, everybody. How's it going? This is Rob Turley. I'm your host at Down the Rabbit Hole podcast, and it is great to be here with a good friend, Bryan Whittington. He is an awesome guy. He is one of the chapter presidents at AAISP, which is awesome. So he's out in Pennsylvania. He's a very talented guy that is taking the organizational ideology and skill behind military operations and applying that to sales, which I never thought these two things or that sentence that I just said would ever come out of my mouth. So it's kind of awesome. So I'll give him that. It's been great so far working with him. So we do work together on some things so far, and we're building that relationship. So it's been a lot of fun. So I would love to introduce, my audience here to Bryan. So Bryan, please introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Rob. I appreciate you having me here. And it's been a lot of fun. So taking military and the discipline in the military, taking that to sales, because I think you and I were talking about this offline. How in the world do we drive the math of sales yet not throw the lack of ability as a numbers game in sales? So how do you bring that discipline to sales, leverage the math of it, and then scale it? Sales operations, and that's what we do. So appreciate this opportunity to be on.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So today we're going to be talking about not only that, but mainly how do we drive the ability to solution within a sales team or just the business in general, because solutioning skills are one of the biggest downfalls of the market. I know I've talked about solutioning in some other podcasts, but this is going to be about that specifically and how to teach our salespeople how to critically think. Critical thinking is not as easy as it sounds. I mean, it doesn't actually sound easy at all, but it's hard. I wouldn't say hard, but it is a tricky thing to be able to teach people how to do critical thinking and how to solution, because solutioning is driven by critical thinking. It's being able to take a subject matter or a problem or an idea and think about it at a very quick pace to be able to structure and put all of the pieces together and understand how it connects to everything in a very short time frame, right? And then being able to produce a solution and a step-by-step process to solution, which also is known as solutions architecture. But this is more on the sales side of things. So sales solutions architecture. So anyway, Bryan, how do you introduce the idea of solutioning to a sales team?
Yeah, so really I take it, instead of the word solutioning, I take it as how in the world can you build your experience a little bit more quickly? Because if you look at experience, that experience is going to bring wisdom. And that wisdom is not what you tell somebody, but how do you pull that information from them? And my sense is if you put in the right systems and processes, or we call it an experience builder, it's really helping that new person to identify the root causes or the root problems that we solve, the right questions to ask, and then being able to tie the answers to those questions to the solutions that you offer. And guess what? If you don't offer solutions to those root cause problems, don't sell them anything, because they're going to be a headache. So that's the way that we look at it for our sales team.
Yes, if the sales team cannot properly solution, they often cannot get down to the nit and the grit of the whole thing. And that causes problems for the customer success team. It causes problems for the engineering team, the product team, the services team, whatever else it may be, because they're not a fit for the product. So if you cannot properly solution, you'll often missell. Mis-selling seems like a great thing to a lot of salespeople, because guess what? They're getting commission on it, but it's really hurting the company, which can hurt your job and your stability. So being able to solution is going to drive more value, and you're going to be able to discover who's the best to work with, because working with a customer who is a good fit, they're often going to be way more transactional. They're going to spend more money. They're going to be easier upsold, and it's an easier relationship to keep. So that will lower your churn.
Yeah. And it's really difficult to differentiate yourself right now. There's so much noise in the marketplace, and the way people want to buy, that whole entire sales process, how you sell your solution matters. And that's how you can differentiate yourself. And if you have a brand new SDR straight out of school, how in the world can you take that tribal knowledge, that non-transferable skills? Now, here's what a transferable skill is, right? Or a non-transferable skill is. If I said, hey, Rob, how do you do this? You're like, I don't know. You just kind of do it, right? It's what is innate, what is natural to you. And the goal here in this experience builder, or being able to take this and give experience to a net new person, is how do they systematically uncover this so they can learn it quickly in sound bites? Because you're going to run into the same 9 questions, the same 9 objections, and stories that the founder or other team members have. You can learn those in vignettes. So if you teach this to them in bite-sized pieces and do kind of almost like an if-then statement, they can quickly get this. And that's going to allow them, whenever they're talking to the C-suites, to bring value, because if I don't do that, I'm going to get pushed down to the level that I sound. And so if I sound like I should be talking to procurement, I'm going to get pushed down there. If I don't even make it up to that level, then who knows where I'm going to be at. But if I need to have that C-suite conversation or that VP, and I'm a 22-year-old kid straight out of college or straight out of university, I have no idea how to do this stuff. And if we can teach this process, they can pick it up and sound like they belong there.
Yep, that's 100% true. And age is not a statistic either, because I mean, for example, I'm a C-suite and I'm 25 years old. It doesn't matter. You just need to know what you're talking about. You need to learn it. You need to be passionate about it, and you need to have understanding. And I love how you mentioned if-then statements. That is literally everything in nature, everything in sales, everything in anything and everything ever. In the history of time is if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that. And then you get all the ifs from that, and then that. So it's all outcome based off of if this happens, that happens. Everything, well, I mean, you can think about it as the butterfly effect. Everything affects everything else. If you kill like a raccoon, that can perhaps have been the dinner for a wolf who is starving, and that wolf dies, and then its pups die, and then something else gets affected by that. And then so you could see how everything affects everything else. And being able to see things in a network of systems and cycles, that's an entire business. No matter how you break it down, I teach this when I teach solutioning and, well, solutions architecture, is that everything is connected. So often, if a company is having a problem, let's say targeting, because that's what we specialize in, right? My company specializes in helping people target mathematically, right? If a company has a targeting issue, it doesn't matter what they sell. It doesn't matter if it's product or service oriented. It doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C. It doesn't matter anything. None of that is actually relevant, because if they're having a targeting issue, it's going to affect every other aspect of the company. And every company is really doing the same thing. They have a product or a service. They need to sell it. They need to be profitable. They need to have an operating system, so a method of operations that actually functions and works. You need to have a hierarchy so people can report up and manage down, manage up, and manage horizontally. So it all functions the same way. They need to market. They need to advertise effectively. They need to have the proper language. They need to have a personality and present themselves. Every company is exactly the same. When you really break it down to the brass tacks, and they're having a targeting issue, they're going to have all the other issues that come along with it, no matter what it is they sell or what they do.
But wait a second, I'm unique. Right? Everyone says, no, I'm different. 100%, right? And if you think about it, you said everything is connected. And I think that's where that experience comes into play. That's where, if I'm experienced in a particular segment of the business, then I can quickly connect the dots. And the idea here is, how do we get our sales team to connect the dots, not only of the product or the solution that we're offering, but also how do we, especially, so if we look at a sale, and you have this up on your LinkedIn page, that we have one funnel now. It's marketing. It's all of this coming together. So I have to align not only my product to the problem that my prospect is having, but then also bridge the gap between sales and marketing in that top of the funnel. There's so much interconnectivity that I have to be able to figure out, that it would take me years and years to be able to do that on my own, but we won't live long enough to learn everything on our own. And you have to know what to watch on Google or on YouTube, or what to Google in order to find this stuff. And there's so much bad advice out there. The information's already within your organization. So getting it out, and it's likely more simple than what most people think.
It's knowledge, competence, listening skills, and understanding. That's really all it is. And when it comes to, like I said, there's no difference between any company. That's the objective. That's operationally. That is from a perspective of they must do and survive and grow. That's just really it. So it doesn't matter what it is that they're doing or how they're surviving or whatever else. It's all based off of if this problem exists. And so, okay, so if I were to create a diagrammatic, let's say a flow diagram of all the problems that a company's having, and they're reporting it, so let's keep it consistent, from a targeting issue, what does that affect? If that, then what? Then what else? And if those, then what, then what, then what, then what? So you can pretty much take that diagram that you create based off of that targeting issue. Let's say you're working with a sales outsourcing company, and they have X, Y, and Z problems that all branch out to everything else. If you were to go to a manufacturing company that is having a targeting issue as well, you can pretty much take that exact same flow diagram, copy it, and paste it onto their company. It's going to mimic it almost perfectly. So what I like to teach salespeople is that don't think in market segmentation. Think from a holistic point of view. If these problems exist, and you're speaking to a company or an industry that you have no experience in, if they're having that problem, just like the company that you're familiar with that you just helped solution with, you can copy and paste that exact same thing. All you have to do is change your mindset and your terminology. So you ask them enough questions to learn how they speak about their stuff and to learn about them. And since they're all, they're trying to differentiate, they're different from everyone else. You could just apply that same solutioning process to that company. You just need to speak their language. It's literally that simple.
100%. And this is where most people fail because they don't slow down enough to build this out. So a couple of things to do this, whether you put it into Playbook or on Google Docs or, Google Drive, or you're on SharePoint, create a pool of those stories. And then what all areas or what all topics this will relate to. So whenever you run into this, you can go right to that story. It has to be indexed and practiced, right? Because what most people don't do, so let's go back to the military days. I always talk about the sim of death, right? Whenever the first time that you ran into a problem was not ideally in the air, right? You wanted to, whenever I was flying airplanes, you wanted to have that practice before you got there. So we do sims of death. I had a 4-engine airplane, 3 engines go out. I'm over the Atlantic. My electric goes out and I'm facing a hurricane, right? If you can survive that and effectively ditch the airplane in the Atlantic Ocean under those scenarios, whenever one engine goes out on takeoff, you're like, no big deal. So why don't we put ourselves through that rigor, through that exercise? Because we fight like we train, so let's train like we fight. Why don't we do that in the sales process? Because I'm telling you, sales, whether it's sales or marketing, whatever it is, driving revenue, it's a fight. And if you don't do that, if that's a war that you lose, you're out. And everybody's affected, and your dream, your hopes, and what you could have positively impacted society with is gone. So we gotta fight like we train, or we train like we fight. So let's fight like we train.
Yeah. Oh, I love that analogy too, because if you think of SDRs, those are the Marines. They're the front lines. They're the first people to battle. That's that. Yes. And then if you're talking about the people who are the solution sellers or the solutions architects or the sales engineers, those guys are going to be the people who are most likely going to be something like the Navy SEALs. They're the ones who come in at that given time. And then the generals are going to be the VPs or the C-suite that come in to do the end negotiation and call it a day. It's that same thing. And then if you're talking about AEs, that's the Army right there. They come in after the Marine Corps goes in, right? So it's the same type of a structure. It's the same hierarchy as military. Military and business are pretty much structured the exact same way. There's no difference. It's just that military is for the purpose of war and for the purpose of helping people who are in need outside of war. It's doing like, nonprofit type of helping the planet, such as like the Peace Corps type of a thing. The U.S. military is used for that all the time, just to help people who are in a struggle, and to help countries that are in disrepair, right? So it's the same exact thing that you're doing with the business, is that you're approaching people who need help, and you're trying to help them with your process and with your solution. And if someone is trying to fight against their competitors, you're also helping them fight against their competitors too. So you're helping them win that war. It's the exact same thing.
Correct. I mean, and I believe in a mindset of abundance. There's so much out there. So there's enough for, I have a number of friendly competitors because there's so much out there, but it is a war. So don't think otherwise. I mean, you have to go out and war. You're breaking other people's toys. In business, you're taking other people's customers or developing net new customers. So you have to be able to do this and do it faster, more effectively than your competitors. And if we can do this like you were talking about, the peacekeepers, right? You don't have to be aggressive, but you do have to be assertive. You don't have to be the stereotypical salesperson that is only, close, close, close. It's leveraging all of this wisdom, and I'll call it wisdom through experience, but experience shortened through this process. That's how we can win and allow the person on the receiving end of this to enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly. So when solutioning comes in, guess what? That you're being the operator. You are helping them find out what they need to do. You're helping them with the strategy of how they need to win their war, pretty much. And when it comes to solutioning, what does a C-suite want? What does a VP want? They want help trying to figure out what to do. If you're just selling a product, feature selling is the saddest, most pathetic form of selling. We have these features and the product does this. Don't tell them what the product does. No one gives a shit about your product. What they care about is, how is my problem going to be solved? Your product could help solve that problem, but guess what? If they bought your product and didn't do anything, is their problem fixed? No, it's not. How do they implement it into their business? All people want to know is, how is this going to affect my EBITDA? That's just overall revenue after taxes and everything else. That's where your company valuation comes into play. But how are we going to make more money? How is this going to make me money? How is this going to make my team more efficient, more effective, and so on? And how is this going to implement into my business? And how difficult is it going to be to implement this? How long is it going to take to learn? And overall, what is going to be the general effect on everything else? How is this going to solve the problems that I have? And how well does this product speak to me? And that's all based off of the buyer's journey. And the buyer's journey is driven by solutioning when you're talking to higher level executives, because they're trying to figure out how to solve it, because their job is to solve problems.
Yeah, and to overly simplify, you have three areas that you can sell on. One, how can I reduce risk? That's risk of loss, risk of reputation, whatever the case may be, but there's risk. The second thing is really time. How can you save me time? Third is how can you make me more money? That's the lifeblood of this. And there's really only two types of buyers out there, but we try to sell to everyone. With reality, there's only two types of buyers. One is that open-minded person that's going to be always trying that next new. So they're the innovators. The other buyer that's out there is somebody that's already in pain. But for whatever reason, we try to sell to the middle, right? Those people in the comfort level, their comfort zone that aren't going to change. That cost of change, the price of change or the fear of change is going to be greater than the pain that I'm currently in or my wants, aspirations of this growth mindset. So if it's anywhere in that middle, that comfort zone, I don't care what you do, how well you sell it, or what you say, you're not going to get there. So who are the growth-minded people? Who are the people already existing in pain? And then position that, message that around those three areas of reducing risk, saving time, driving revenue. And if we do those things, we're good to go.
Yeah, I was told a little bit differently, but it's the exact same thing as what you said. Is that, I don't know, so just so the listeners can hear a different form of this, is that there are proactive buyers and then there are reactive buyers. Proactive is the growth mindset. Reactive is shit's already hit the fan and they waited till it was too late.
Yep.
That's it. Those are the two people that are going to buy from you. The people that are in the middle, if they don't need something, they're going to look at it as a novelty.
And the people in the middle is nurturing, and you having a good, good interpersonal skill to go, not say, I told you so, right? You should have done this back whenever I was reaching out to you to begin with, but that's it. I mean, so proactive, reactive, however you want to call it, growth-minded, already in pain, but 100%, absolutely.
Yeah, those are more the easy sells too. So the people that are in the comfort zone are there usually because they're ignoring the problems or because they're doing well enough. It's I call it the good enough disease.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, we're doing good enough. Well, don't you want to be in that 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x growth? Well, is your 1.5x good enough? Why is that good enough? You're sitting there happy? That's called denial. Of course you want a better, faster, stronger company. Of course. But if it's good enough, it's like, well, I don't even really want to deal with it or think about it. We're just skating along and doing our thing. That's not healthy. It's either you're growing or you're receding. Yeah,
and the curious thing is, it always frustrates me. Everybody's in love with the idea of success. They're just not willing to do the work that it takes to be successful. It's never ceases to shock and amaze me how everybody wants the easy path. And when are we going to learn that there's no silver bullet? There's work involved. And the curious thing is, it's not the busyness of work. It's stopping down and slowing down to figure out what's the root cause and solving that. That work of thinking is where I think most people are. I don't know why they won't do that, but they won't drive down into what's really preventing this and do that problem solving.
Because humans are addicted to success and they're not willing to actually contemplate the failure, what happened to actually improve, because they have something that already works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset. But the thing is that often you need to take one step back to take 3 steps forward. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in that same spot. And that's what people, because they don't want to take a step back. No, I want to keep growing or I want to keep pushing forward, but it's become impossible to do so. You need to take that step back to take those 3 steps forward, not just 1 step forward, but 3 steps forward is taking a step back. And so what did you just do? You took 2 steps instead of being stuck in a stasis. And that's where solutioning comes in too. Just like you said, there are the 2 types of people. There's the proactive buyers, there's the reactive buyers, but then there are the people that are in the comfort zone. Those people are not in the comfort zone because they're comfortable. They're in the comfort zone because they are denying or they are not thinking about the actual things that are the ingrained details. So that's where solutioning comes in. If you're speaking to someone who is in a comfort zone, if you're able to problem solve, use critical thinking and solution with them, you'll actually usually find a lot of issues exist within their company that they didn't even know about. So if you can keep breaking that stuff down, if this, then that, well, what's your outcome? What have you done to try to improve that? Where does that leave you? Is that good enough for you? What is good enough? do you want to be growing? So asking all the right questions and breaking it down, you're going to discover a whole heap of problems, even if they're comfortable. And that's going to change their mindset from comfort to either panic or wanting to grow. And you can break down the comfortable people into the proactive or reactive buyers because they're just simply not aware that they're proactive or reactive in what you're trying to sell them. But if you have a solution that does not solve these problems that you discover, then you could still bring them value by first, they know all of these new issues that they're having within their business, and you can push them toward a product or a service or a professional who actually can help them. And then you're bringing them value that way, and they're likely to refer you to somebody because you helped them solve a problem that you couldn't even solve directly. You put them in the right direction, and you still brought them that value.
Correct. And that's where you're that value or that trusted advisor at that point, and they become your biggest evangelist. You might not have sold them right then and there, but they will be your biggest evangelist. Evangelists
are almost better than an actual sale, because an evangelist is someone that you had a great conversation with. That's free marketing. That's free advertising. And that's advertising is word of mouth, which is still the most effective form of advertising, because who are you going to believe, a friend or a commercial?
Correct.
Really? And with that said, when someone's evangelizing for you, that one person that you had, an hour-long conversation with that came to nothing, no result, they could be sending you 5 customers within the next 2 months. That it's a referral, and referrals are 4.5 times as likely to close.
And then if you look at this, to put some practicality, because I always like to make application, right? Because if you learn something, then knowledge is pointless. It's the application of it. So if you really, So if you're looking for how do I give my team experience, if you look at it, experience can be built out in whenever I was kind of brainstorming this, can be brought out in 4 areas. 1 is wisdom, 2 is tactics. Really, that's it, wisdom and tactics. And then there's a tool that you can use with the experience builder. But the beauty about this, if you look at this, Rob, what you already said is the tactics of this is critical thinking or problem solving. Right. So how do we get somebody to actually think critically? So doing something as simple as, just a simple mind map allows them to quickly build this out, and they start to see the interrelatedness. Where do these things overlap? Right. So a simple thing is a mind map for that critical thinking problem solving if you're not natural at it. The other piece is active listening.
I want to add, building that mind map. And yes, I agree. I love that you just showed that piece of paper, the mind map, because so many salespeople don't do that. You ask about their issues, and you're able to define and be able to see visually, this is the problem. These are the outcomes that they're getting. This is where the pain is. And you can start making all those connections. And then, you could do a hard, triple circle around the things that are the major pain points, and then start building out from there and asking questions and then breaking that down to find what the root cause is.
Precisely, because where most people fail is they don't know how to tie that person's pain into the solution that you solve. Your mind, you're connecting the dots because you have that experience, you have that ability, but they never see it. And a new person can't even connect the dots. And that's where we have to take that transferable skill or that non-transferable skill and lock it down and show them how to do this. So is it Venn diagrams where you have the 3 circles that interrelate, or the multiple circles that?
Oh yeah, 2 circles, 3 circles, 4. It doesn't matter how many.
Yep. So it's getting that Venn diagram, and that allows the visualization. Now we just started messing around with this a couple of weeks ago, because I was too analytical on this and it was too much outline and too many things along those lines. So we started bringing, right. So we've started bringing some visualization to it, because I'm very auditory and the visual doesn't help me terribly much, but most of the people out there are extremely visual. So bringing that in there allows them to understand it a lot more quickly. And you can even pass it to your prospect and say, hey, these are the areas of interrelation. I don't know which, if any of these are applicable to you. None of these. All right. Thank heavens. I just saved a ton of time, because if it's a no and an NO, I'm going to K-N-O-W pretty darn quickly, so I stop wasting time.
Yep, that's right, and that's the power of no. I just did a podcast, the one before this that I did with Arturo Del Rio, is about the power of no in sales. And that's the power of no, is both N-O and a K-N-O-W, both no's. So that's a lot of fun. But like you said, the Venn diagram, if you do the triple circles Venn diagram, that's called a genius model. That's what it's been nicknamed. That's what it's been coined. And it's one of the most popular models that's going around right now in business, to show here are 3 core attributes of where we, all these things are the best possible. There's a bunch of memes on it too. I've seen one where it's like pirate, ninja, and then something else. And then like the middle was
Chuck Norris.
It was hilarious shit. No, that's the thing. That's the thing, is that's one of the most famous models in business right now. It's trending and it's great. Make one, because it can train your sales team too. Like I just trained my sales team because there was a lack of it in the sales process, or in, I guess, their knowledge bases. What is the purpose of the company? Why do we exist? They kept saying, so what if I were to ask you why, the only appropriate way to say to or for, to do this or for this purpose, like that. There's twos and fours. They were saying whiches, what's, and hows. Why do we exist? How doesn't matter. What doesn't matter. Which doesn't matter. And it's just, and then a why either. Why would you ask why for why? That's another question. So it's 2 and 4. That's what it is. And they weren't able to frame it that way. So that's a weak entrance point into a sale, because they cannot say our purpose without trying to sell them. The which, the what's, and the hows, that's product selling. It's not idea. It's not selling the idea. It's not selling the vision. It's not selling the value. You need to open with that. Otherwise, it's going to be a weak sell. It's just, oh, this guy's just trying to sell me, or, oh yeah, he's just pitching a product to me, or whatever. You're not selling them on the vision. You're not selling them on the ideology, the methodology.
Correct. And we have to be very careful as sellers. Whenever they say, well, what do you do? That is a trap. Don't fall down that trap.
What do you do is why do you exist? That's what that question means. So what is it that you do? No, they're asking, what is your purpose?
Yeah. Or I might even say, what do you do? What of these 3 problems do you solve? Are you going to help me reduce risk? Are you going to help me to save time? Are you going to help me to get more money? Right? What of those are you going to help me solve? And then, but most people, what they do is they say, well, what we do is, and they lay out a whole litany of features and benefits that they could care less about. It's like you go to the only person that cares about your family vacation photos is you and your family. Right? If you're not in that photo, you don't care. So why in the world are we doing a features of benefit is the same as a slideshow to your family vacation, for goodness sakes?
Oh my God, yes. I don't know when people are going to figure that out. No one gives a shit about your trip to Mexico. No one. Not a single person. Maybe someone else in your family will, but at the same time, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's great. Sure, yeah. And they're just supporting you to make you feel good about yourself. That's it.
Because the only people care are the people in the photo. You see a photo, you're looking for you. Other than that, you don't care too much.
This is what I'm trying to teach my sales team as well. I'm sure yours as well, is that stop selling the product, because no one gives a shit about your product. All they care about is themselves, the what's in it for me, and how is this going to affect me? How is this going to make me money? How is this going to benefit me? And your purpose is that, like, for example, our purpose, if you do it based off of the Venn diagram model, is that we enhance targeting so that you can sell with precision and speed, ultimately to increase the revenue velocity, resulting in higher quality outcomes to drive the optimization of sales. Therefore, reducing the cost of new customer acquisition and enabling sales and marketing teams to achieve more. That's it. So if I said that quicker, it should be done in about 10 seconds. Otherwise, guess what? They're walking out the door. They're like, all right, I don't know what this guy's talking about anymore. It's just enhancing targeting accuracy for precision and speed to increase revenue velocity for higher quality outcomes, to optimize conversion, ultimately resulting in reduced cost of customer acquisition and enhance effectiveness and efficiency of a sales and marketing team. That's it, period.
Yeah.
That's why we exist. We help businesses do that. You're not saying we're going to help you. Our purpose is to help you. No. What do I have to do with your purpose? You're just giving them the overlay of, this is how we affect businesses. This is what we do. Is that a fit? Do you want to keep talking about it?
Yeah, and I also look at like so we one of the ways to really do good problem solving, if that's the right way of saying it, one way to do good problem solving is through questioning strategies. And so anything that you want to say, you couch that in terms of a question. So in other words is, hey, what do you do? Well, you know how, we love the you know how statements, right? You know how your sales team is out there hitting the phones all the time, doing a million emails, no one's answering, they're only having a conversation or two a day, and then of those conversations 2 a day, they're not even going anywhere. We help to streamline that, lower headcount, reduce costs, increase revenue.
Yes, relatability. You just added a layer of relatability. How does this affect me? How can I relate to this? If it's not relatable, you can't sell them. Think about comedy. It's very similar. It needs to affect you emotionally in some way where it's either, it offends you or it makes you laugh, right? There's a very fine line between those things. But if you are speaking about something that is not directly relatable to somebody, they're never going to think it's funny, and they're never going to get offended because they don't understand it. They don't think about it. So what is something that most companies, when I say most, I mean the majority, the greater majority, is an issue that they're dealing with. There's something that they're constantly working on. That's how you speak to them, or give them a real life situation. If an SDR were to contact 100 people and they only land 2 meetings, I mean, sure, they met their quota, but really, how effective is that? And they go, oh yeah, no, my SDRs only really set 2 meetings a month too, because I don't know what's going on there. So, and that's thinking about sales, the numbers game, which it's not a numbers game, it's a relationships game.
Yeah, because worse than they keep adding to the technical debt, right? I keep adding sales enablement tools.
I love how you use the term technical debt as a salesperson, because that is like an unknown term outside of like engineering.
Yeah. So I just learned it. I had a woman on my podcast, Shannon Gregg, the other day that I learned that from. I'm like, that is brilliant, right? So I'm fairly new to that term, but it's so true, because we keep adding layer after layer after layer onto this thing. And then we go, well, that's not working, so let me add the head count. So then we add more people and more people. So we throw, it's like back in World War II was sending the Russians against the Germans, right? So the Germans were better outfitted, better technology, better weaponry, better training, but the Russians had vodka, drugs, and a lot more Russians, and that's how they overcame it. So headcount is not the solution, and a tool with a full is still a full. Technology isn't really the solution. It's doing a better job, getting that top of the funnel numbers better. And then when you're doing it, asking the right questions to problem solve to the root cause where it's relative or relevant for them. So that was a long way of saying that.
It's true. Problem solving is one of the most powerful things that you could do. And what is a business trying to do? Solve problems. Why does a business exist? To solve a problem, to create a convenience. A convenience is based off of something that's difficult, which is a problem, because people are lazy and chaotic, just like the rest of the universe. Lazy and chaotic. Entropy. That is the nature of all things. Yep. Humans are the only creatures out there trying to contradict the entropy of the universe, the nature, the order. So the law of order is chaotic and lazy when we try to create order, which is organized order, which is the opposite of how things are supposed to be. So it's constantly an uphill battle no matter what. And that is all based off of coming up with solutions, conveniences.
Yeah. And then I think the other part of that, so the tactics, you get into problem solving, questioning strategy, and then active listening, right? Because I think most salespeople are horrible at that, because
they're just trying to think of the next thing to say, or trying to inject themselves into something, because, they're like, oh, I came up with this thing. Literally, this is what I teach salespeople, and they love me for it. Is that if you think of something while they're speaking, shut your fucking mouth. Have a piece of paper in front of you. God forbid you take notes, but don't take notes like right there. You can write the mind map, right? That's the most effective way. But if you're just having a regular conversation and it's not a solution in conversation, if you want to say something, literally just write one word down so that it reminds you, and then write them in order. You have it like, you start at the top, and then the next one down, like number 1, this, number 2, that, number 3, that. And then you can speak back to them in the order in which they were speaking, so that it is chronologically and directionally relevant. So it's a way that they explained it to you. So your retort is going to be the same way that they explained it, so that it actually makes sense to them, rather than bouncing back and forth and confusing them.
So now you've just built an immense amount of trust, because people don't know, or people don't care about you, and they won't trust you unless if you're able to feed that back to them and they know that you're listening. And if they know that you're listening, and you don't necessarily parrot that back, but even go back the same ideas in the same order, now you're in agreement. Oh, this person's just like me. I can trust them. And that goes into communication. So you have that active listening piece that then ties into communication. So if you think about this, nothing new under the sun. In order to be a good, experienced, built person, shortening down that time frame, I simply need the tactics of everything else that you're already working on whenever you're looking at sales training. Is how do I problem solve, questioning strategy, active communication, active listening and communication, right? You can go more deeply into the communication, like transactional analysis and disc profile or personality profiling, so you can better understand them. But that's really it. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. Bring those to what you're already doing, and then figure out how to think critically, cheat with a mind map.
Right, exactly. Mind maps are so powerful. Every salesperson should do it, in my opinion. But like you, one of the oldest tricks in the book is repeat back what they said to you to ensure that's validation. So you're saying that you're having difficulty targeting, yeah? They said
That's
that,
right.
yeah, I think we're having trouble targeting new people. Just repeat it back to them. And that mind map thing, and that thing where you're writing it down in that order in which that they were talking about, that's a way of proposing a solution or talking about what they should do next in the order in which they said it. So it's like a combo. It's like a hybrid between repeating what they said back to you and giving them the solution at the same time. So that is the truest form of understanding and solution.
Yeah, and the curious thing is, I learned this from a mentor of mine, a guy by the name of John Rosso, and he vision of the solution. I don't know if he made that up or it's probably out there. But you go, okay, what were you hoping I could do? And they literally will tell you what their vision of the solution is.
They will tell
Yeah, I mean, it's so insane, and we're like making stuff up and making it overly complicated. Hey,
people
what were you
are afraid to ask questions like, oh, is that too much to ask? Should I be asking something like that? C-suite executives and VPs are more than open to talking about their problems. That's why they're having this conversation with you, is that it's not too, if they want to talk about it, they'll say, I'm not comfortable talking about that. They're not going to judge you for it. Nothing's going to happen. They're just going to tell you, no, I don't want to talk about that. And that's the end of that. Continue the conversation. Doesn't matter. But most of the time, no matter how in-depth or painful it is, they'll speak on it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, so for the leaders and the sales managers out there, as you're working with your team, and by the way, this can work across, I don't care if you're sales, marketing, or anywhere, you can use the same methodology here. Whenever you ask them a question, well, when you said this, what did they say? Right now, you have to watch your tone on there, which goes to communication, so you don't come across as a big a-hole, right? But whenever you ask them, hey, when you said this, what do they say? Well, I didn't ask them that. Okay, well, next time, ask them that. So it's really good coaching to get them to dive down more deeply, because oftentimes they're scared to ask the hard questions. I want to be assertive, not aggressive. I bring value by the questions that I ask, not the information that I give. That's how you show your genius. And anything that you want to say, figure out how to ask it in the question, and you'll know you're doing well whenever they say this. Well, that's a good question. And the next time they're going to go, that's a good question. And the next time it's almost going to be inaudible.
You could see the oh shit on their face.
And that's when you're bringing value.
That's when they drop their guard too. A lot of salespeople, I mean, I've listened to a bunch of different sales meetings, things like that. They miss when they drop their defenses. They're giving you that opening, and they're just too dead set on finishing their agenda or talking about the product or whatever else it is. They just gave you that opening. Take the opening. It doesn't matter. You don't have to pitch the whole thing. They could already be sold. It doesn't matter. That's a conversation for later down the road, right?
Right.
And I like how you say confidence is key to any salesperson. If you're not confident in a product, you're not going to sell it. It's that simple. But it's the knowledge behind it. It's that expertise, but it's driven by tone and inflection. When you're solutioning with somebody, you don't want to come off as arrogant. You don't want to come off as sarcastic. And you want what you're saying not to sound like a question. I try to teach this all the time. It's like a disease, I swear to God. It's that questions should have an upward inflection. So how are you doing today? That's the upward inflection. If you're saying, well, I think that it would be the best idea for you to start using this technology, because it sounds like you are uncertain. You don't even know what the hell you're talking about. You're stating everything that you are giving to them as a suggestion, as a question, which makes the entire thing questionable. It should be direct, the same way that I'm speaking right now. Have pauses that are going to affect what you're saying, so that it gives them time to think about it, and openings so that they can actually take that information and they can digest it where they're not overwhelmed. It gives them time to think about it, and it also gives you that feeling that you have expertise by stating, and this is me being direct. This is me right now being, well, I'm not being aggressive. Like you were saying, oh, what's the other word? It's you want to be assertive.
Assertive.
Yeah. Yep. Just forgot the word. Yeah. So this is me being assertive, and it's me being direct, and it's me being candid. It's not me being, you're not doing this right. You're not being aggressive, or you're not saying, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would you ever do that? Or something. Just, you need to validate, and validation is driven through assertion, but assertion that does validate them and makes a good point. You know what you're talking about with the proper inflections, with the proper tone, so that they know that you are serious and they know that you know what you're talking about.
Precisely. So a couple of things off of this. I've been messing around with an idea, I call it trust statements, right? So there's three different types of trust statements. There's a negative trust statement. So Chris Voss will call that labeling, or in Sandler methodology, that's going to be going for the no, right? So that negative label, hey, it seems like, sounds like, or hey, you wouldn't want to do this. So it's a negative type of trust statement. Another type of trust statement is a humility statement. So psychology terms, it's okay, not okay. It's where you minimize it, making it easier for them to admit to something. So, hey, you likely don't have this, or you've probably seen other people do this, and you make it very safe for them to say yes. Or clarity, some type of a clarity statement to get, am I right on that? Or if they say, hey, let's just say, hey, that's too expensive. That was a statement. I don't have anything off of that. I'd only be able to ask a question. So if they say, hey, this is too expensive, or I'll just use that one. You go, which means, right? So a simple clarity statement to get them unpack that. So in those trust statements, that is couched in the reality that I have to be active listening and have the strength to that, be assertive, not aggressive, because where most people fail, and I can't remember the study, but it was most salespeople ask a question and wait 0.3 seconds until a response.
Waiting 3 seconds before you respond, it means that they still may be thinking about what they're going to say next, which means that you've actually captivated them, that you've captured them. They're taking the time to think before they speak, which is very important because it means that they're engaged.
And if you ask a really good question, it's going to step them back, and they're going to need to think about it. And where most salespeople screw up is they'll start to talk. So while they're trying to think through this, because you really hit them with a good question, now you just pissed them off because I can't even think of this. So you just ruined the moment.
Yeah. And it's that salespeople feel like they have to inject the silence with words. Sometimes people need to be given that time to think, especially in negotiation, but that's a whole different conversation. But in a sale, 6 seconds of silence is okay. It's okay because they're thinking. They're going to eventually fill that dead space. They're not going to sit there and say nothing. But if it's a point that you made that they're really genuinely thinking about it, and you've already captivated them, and they're already doing critical thinking processes and solutioning with you, give them that time to think. It's okay. It may feel awkward, but that state of awkward is where you start getting the most progress.
100%. And you have to have strength to do that. So a really good exercise, Rob, you could try this with your sales team too. If your sales team or your people on your team that you're trying to get them to have more presence or prowess, have them do this simple exercise. If they'll do it this way, great. Shut their eyes, don't shut their eyes, but have them think of the most powerful person that they can think of. The person that just oozes presence, like, oh my gosh, right? They just walk in a room and boom, everybody has their eyes on them, right? So think of that person. Okay, now, whatever you were going to say, have that person say it and hear that person how they say it, their tonality, their pace, their inflection. And it's incredible, Rob. I started doing this a couple of years ago, and without fail, every single person who's done it, first try out of the gate sounds night and day different.
I'm taking note of this right now because that sounds like something that would really help a couple of the people on my team that are having difficulty with that.
Their tone will go down. They're almost not quite an octave, but it's going to come down. Their pace slows, and they'll have pauses in between there. It's amazing how it works.
Because I've tried to teach that, but I've never thought about it that way before. For me, it's just natural. And it's, well, just do it. Why don't you just do it? Well,
transferable skills.
But yeah, that's a great way to actually visualize something that is totally audio.
Yes. And what you just pointed out, those are non-transferable skills. I don't know, you just do it. And it's finding small little things like this, small little exercises that take that non-transferable skills and allows it to be transferable. And that's the hard work of the leadership for us to figure out, well, why is that working? So whenever I was flight instructing, stupid little book about, a 1/4 inch thick from the FAA with 1962 graphics. It was horrible. And I don't know why this stands out to me so much, but within it, it says that that knowledge happened, or excuse me, you know that learning happened when there was a change in behavior. And I thought, you know what, that's really rather quite good, because if I'm a leader, behavior has to change. If I'm in sales, behavior has to change. There has to be something that moves. And so whether a teacher, a salesperson, a leader, a manager, whatever the case may be, I have to affect behavior. And all of these little nuances here that we've talked about today help those behaviors move more quickly or change.
Behavioral goals. That is the Sandler methodology, is that salespeople should be setting 3 behavioral goals for the week and trying to work on them and talk about what the progress is with their behavioral goals rather than outcomes. Because I want to set 15 meetings this week. Yeah, congratulations. If your behavior doesn't change, those quality of meetings don't change. I don't care how many meetings you set. If, let's say, one of my salespeople, they set 35 meetings in a week. Spectacular. But they only close 1. We have a problem.
Yeah, or if 2 show up.
People sets 2 meetings in a week and they close both, I'm happier with that salesperson.
Well, and that's wisdom, right? Because unfortunately, there's too many sales managers out there or sales leaders out there that go back to sales as a numbers game, and it's not. There's the like we talked about
is a pathetic excuse to try to micromanage people into doing the amount of work that they think is acceptable based off of their low success rate.
Unfortunately, right.
Yeah, it's a sad excuse. Quotas are the death of sales. That's the way that I've always seen it. I think it is a pathetic excuse to get people to do something. If you ever noticed, cold callers, the people who have the least amount of calls, are the cold callers that are the most effective.
So that's a curious statement. So you don't come across as somebody that's not holding somebody accountable. So if quota is the death knell to sales, how are you holding people accountable? Because I'm sure people are asking that question.
Outcomes and behavior. So have you been trying to improve? Is there noticeable improvement? Can you speak on that improvement? Okay. And what is the difference in outcomes? So if you had 5 in a month, you had, well, let's say in a month, you had 10 next steps presented. How many of those closed? Because you already went through the whole process and everything like that. And now they're at the, the teetering point of whether, should I buy or should I not buy based off of how you approach them and the whole conversation thing that happened, how the relationship was built. It's all depending on that. So it's the middle of the funnel. How are they treating the middle of the funnel? Because everybody forgets about the middle of the funnel. There's the top and then there's the bottom. So you want to close and you want to find more leads. What about everything else that happens in between? I talked to Phil Gerbishek about this and did a whole podcast with him. What about the middle of the funnel? That's the name of it. I think it's episode 18 if anybody wants to watch it. Of Down the Rabbit Hole podcast, this one. But it's about that whole thing. Where's the middle of the funnel? How's that going? What are the outcomes that come from that? So the behaviors that led to, okay, you have 10 next steps presented last month. And I don't believe in report cards either. What are you doing to make it better? But looking at what happened, okay, last month out of those 10, you've had 2 people who closed. But now this month, you have 10 that are set up next steps. You haven't closed anybody yet, let's say. But what are you doing to ensure that you're going to get past those 2 closes or have higher quality outcomes? So it's outcome based, but the behaviors that are driving those outcomes in order to achieve more. And that's just not a company goal. It's not a quota. It's their ability to learn and it's their ability to achieve their own personal goals.
Well, so let's tie this back to the experience builder, because if you figure that out with one, that's where we create the playbooks. And it goes back to the math of sales that you and I were talking about. So whether you call it math of sales, science of sales, whatever you want to call it, there's a math formula that you can reverse engineer to it. So if you look at every single stage from top of the funnel all the way through, and let's say that's one funnel from list identification all the way through closed won, closed loss kind of thing. That's one funnel kind of deal. But if you look at every single one of those stages, I can mentor, coach, and train how to affect each and every one of those stages to improve. Because especially at that top of the funnel, if I can improve by 0.5% or a whole percent or more, my bottom of the funnel is fundamentally transformed for the good. It is amazing. So getting
everything else in between.
Yes. And
you affect one part of the funnel, the rest of the funnel also gets affected. That's just how it is. It's a system. It's a cycle. So it's a system of cycles. And a funnel, I like, the funnel's a great idea, how that works and everything, but every stage in the funnel is essentially its own funnel.
Precisely. Which is a leading indicator for the next one, which is a lagging indicator.
Exactly. So Bryan, you actually get it. so people understand that a sales funnel, each stage in the sales funnel is a funnel. They're all funnels. They're cycles within a system. That system, if one part of it changes, the rest of it changes. It's that simple. If this happens, then that happens, and it affects everything else. It all influences everything else. Let's say your bottom of the funnel is super thin. You're not closing enough people. Well, to change that bottom of the funnel, you're going to change the top of the funnel. So your awareness, your capture, your lead qualification, your sales qualified lead qualification process, all the way down to the proposal. It's all going to change in order to fatten that bottom of the funnel. But if you change, let's say, your qualification methods, that's going to change the bottom and it's going to change the top of the funnel, because once you find out who qualified, your target's going to change. And people don't change their target. They do different qualification methods, but then they don't try to improve the other parts of the funnel beforehand or after that is going to get affected because they just changed something within the middle of the funnel.
Correct. So if let's use that example. Hey, my bottom of the funnel is too thin. Let's use this experience builder exercise. So if you think of it, put that picture of an NCAA, it's March Madness. Let's look at the NCAA bracketing, right? So really what you're doing is bracketing. So you start off the top. Okay, so you're saying that we don't have enough at the bottom of the funnel. So do you think that is we don't know how to target, or we're targeting the right people, but we're just not closing? We're not closing. Okay, so is it that we're not closing because we're not talking to the right people, or is it my people, I want to fire them all and they're not doing any good? So we just keep going either or until you get to the solution, right? So if you have a couple of solutions in your offering, each one of those questions are either going to lead you to your solution, or it's going to make you realize, my solution won't fit that. You disqualify them and hopefully make the introduction to somebody else, wrapping it up to I want to be a trusted advisor. If I'm going to be fired, I'm going to fire myself before I get hired. Let's make the introduction to the right person. So that's how you can use an experience builder, the either or question to drive it down. You give that to your new salesperson for them to memorize that, practice that through a couple of times, and now they instantly have years of experience on one document.
Exactly. And a firm understanding. So the way that I look at it, I'm teaching my sales team this right now, but I learned this from a business psychology college professor that I had. If you cannot effectively describe something or explain something in 5 different ways without thinking about it, you don't know it well enough. It should be inherent. You should be able to explain the same thing a million different ways. But if you can explain it 5 different ways, you know it well enough to talk about it. Because think about it this way. Scripting doesn't work, because as soon as you get thrown off that script or they ask a question, you say, oh, now where was I? Oh, I don't know what to do. There's panic and everything. If you could say it 5 different ways, it doesn't matter what they say, because you can pick up where that left off no matter what.
I was just going to say, with scripting, the prospect never knew their line. That's always what screwed me up on the scripting. They followed their line. So keep going. I love this.
Yeah, no. I mean, think about a sitcom. Imagine you just take someone off the street, throw them into a sitcom, and then don't give them a script and say, okay, you ready? Let's do it. Then it's like, okay, we're rolling. And then everybody starts acting. And then they're just standing there like, what's going on here? What is this? What do I say? And then they're going to try to play along and be like, oh yeah, sure. They're going to make things up and then hopefully it goes well. And that's why, method actors, they become the role. Literally, they become the role. And that is so important. Using that process, people can learn from that, because it's putting yourself in the customer's shoes. Who are they? What do they do? Ask those questions and then think like they do. Present the information like they would want to consume it. So allowing them to have control over the buyer's journey and adapting your mindset into the way that they're thinking.
We tend to sell from the wrong end of the problem. Meaning we look at this from the viewpoint of our product or service. The right way of doing it is switching the side of the table, sitting on the same side of the table as your buyer, and sell from their buyer journey, or ask questions through the buyer journey. If I know their buyer journey, I know where all their roadblocks are going to be. I know what all the challenges are going to be. I know their 9 questions, their 7 objections. I know what all of that's going to be, and I can anticipate it. And I say, you know what, Rob, typically speaking, right here is where people start to ask themselves these questions. And I'll lay out the objections. I'll lay out the questions. And
tell them their objection before they say the objection.
People are like, no.
That is such a level of understanding that it cannot even be taught. It's based off of experience. But if you could say, well, you're probably thinking this, this, and this. And if you actually nailed it to what their objection is before they even said it, they're like, damn, this guy gets it.
And that's the beauty about this, right? Because it's the same every single time. It might happen here or there, but hey, typically speaking, right around this point, you know what's going to come up. So you can put that right in your sales process, right in your playbook, right in your experience builder, and teach your people what to say, how to anticipate it, how to deal with it. And if you teach them that, you're giving them years and years of experience from a playbook. And we can't just teach them once. You can't give them the playbook and say, good luck. It's practice and practice and practice. We have to be like a professional sports team. We have to be like the military, where we're drilling all the time and practicing all the time.
Oh, yeah. And one thing that I do with my sales team, like, for example, we affect targeting, we affect prospecting, we affect identifying, like, opportunity identification. We affect who to contact. We affect the funnel. All the things that we affect. What I do is that I put up a presentation, and it has everything that we affect. And then the only thing in the presentation is one word, dead center in the screen: targeting. Okay, go. What's the problem in the market? What are the struggles? How do we affect targeting? What does it mean? What are people thinking about targeting? What's the idea behind it? So I put up one word and I say, okay, as much as you can, explain it. What's the problem with the market? How is it flowing? What are the issues that people have? And then if it wasn't good enough, if they weren't able to touch on all the points, okay, nope, start over, do it again. Targeting. Tell me about it. Nope, do it again. Targeting. Tell me about it. Nope, you missed this, and this. Okay, yep, do it again. Then they do it again. Okay, the way that I would say it is blah, 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 blah. Do it again. Nope. Okay, the way that I would say it, I explain it a different way. Do it again. And then, nope. Okay, I'll explain it. I say it a whole different way. And I do this. I explain it to them in 10 to 20 different ways that are incredibly in depth until they are able to do it. And what I do is that I have them do it in a circle as well. Talk about it. When you're done, talk about it again. When you're done, talk about it again. When you're done, talk about it again. And they become more and more comfortable with it until it becomes deeply ingrained. And there's no script. There's no tips. There's no notes. It's because they have to use their mind to talk about it. And since there's no tips or notes or script, they're going to say it differently every time. And it builds that and jams it into their brain. It beats it into their skull. So if someone brings up targeting, they know how to talk about targeting about 50 different ways.
Yeah. And then the beauty is, because you know it intuitively, you know it's second nature now. However, Rob, the prospect, is bringing up targeting, whatever the language that Rob is using, I just say the same thing. Because I'm not going to get into an argument over semantics, because how many people just have to prove themselves right and they get into, no, it's actually this. Shut up. It's just, whatever the person says.
It does. It completely tears down the semantics. That's what that process does. Know it, second nature, it becomes intuitive, and it rips down the semantics, because you've said it in so many different ways, understand it on so many different levels. If they talk about it any which way, there is no, oh no, it's this way. There's no opinion on it. There's no objection to it. There's no lack of understanding. It's that, oh, well, I said it 50 different ways. That's similar to one of the ways that I know. And then you could just speak on it the way that they're talking about it instantly.
Yep. And you feed it back exactly the way they wanted to. And the curious thing is, especially younger folks, unfortunately, because maybe we haven't learned it, or people with a certain type of personality, they have to prove themselves right. I don't know what it is in them, but they have to prove themselves right. Forget that. Allow the person on the other side of the table to protect their ego. Don't correct them. Just craft it and say, well, that's a unique way of saying it, or that's a unique way of saying it. Now, I might be wrong here. Humility statement, that trust statement. Let me make sure I understand it. Let me feed it back to you this way. Is that kind of on the same page? Yeah, that's exactly it. Now they make sure that you understand, because you're not parroting it back. You're not being, there's a particular word I can't think of right now. Say again? Condescending is the word I was looking for.
Oh, condescending or objective, yeah.
Yeah, condescending, but now they go, yeah, this person really gets it. And again, we build up that trust, which is the foundation of every relationship. So it can be taught, is the beauty of it.
Yeah, they want to be validated and understood. And that boils down to one word, just one: perspective. That is a non-transferable skill that they need to learn on their own. Perspective. And that's by understanding how do we destroy bias? Well, bias is inherent, but the more ways you can understand something or think about something, the more different approaches that you have to it, a number of different ways that you've talked about it or heard about it or understand it are going to destroy bias, because bias is based off of unidirectional thinking. So multi-directional thinking and multi-threaded thinking is the answer to that, because if you understand it in 100 different ways, you don't have a bias toward one way. There's 100 different ways to think about something. Therefore, bias still exists, but bias exists in 100 different ways, and then all the ways in between those ways that connect all of them together. So there's thousands of different ways that you can understand it. And by destroying that bias, that allows you to adapt to the prospect's perspective.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Rob, this was a hard lesson for me because I have to admit I was stuck and stubborn in my ways, right? I'm pretty strong personality. Um, and I had so much bias that I wouldn't open myself up to coaching, training, and mentoring the way I ought to. And I don't know how much misery I created for myself because of that. When I learned how to open up to that, and whenever I learned to say, well, that's curious. I'm curious why, or I'm curious to understand your point of view, your perspective. That opened up a whole entire world for me. And that allowed me to listen better, not to be, because even if you're saying the right words, your body language is gonna sell you out, right? They're gonna know that you are absolutely uncomfortable. So if you get to the point where that's curious, I had considered that way. Help me understand your perspective or your point of view, because I might be missing something. Have that conversation, and likely they agree with you, but they're saying it completely differently. I was working with a guy today, hour and a half for him to, he was, works with me, right? An hour and a half for me to understand his perspective, and we agreed. It was insane. But there's no way I would have had the patience for that before, or I would have just attacked before. And just that communication skills is so important to be able to draw that out.
I like to call it breaking the barrier.
Okay.
What barrier are you breaking? You're breaking the barrier of bias, and you are replacing it with validation, understanding, and openness. Being open to different, so an open mindset, open-mindedness in general, that is the hardest thing to learn, and it is self-taught. It is something that is experienced. It clicks one day. It's not something you could teach. It's not transferable, but it has to click one day. Some people, it's way later than others, or some people, it's far too late. But that's the thing. I mean, what makes wars happen? A lack of understanding, a lack of validation. That's it. It's not understanding perspective. It's not seeing it from a different direction. How do they feel about this? How do they think about this? Why are they upset about this? Trying to understand that, but not actually having an opinion. They shouldn't be upset about this because I think this way about that. No one gives a shit what you think except for you. If I were to run up to you, I always use this analogy. If I were to run up to you on the street, I was just some random guy out of nowhere. I ran up to you and I said, whose idea is the best ideas? Like in your face real quick. What would you think immediately? You wouldn't say it because you're trying to be polite, but what do you think?
Mine.
Of course, because they're your ideas. Who cares about your ideas? You. How do you make other people care about your ideas? Make it their idea. And they need to see it from their own perspective.
And that comes from questioning strategies.
Yeah, but listen, I think we're over time right now, but this is super interesting. I think everybody who's in my listening base and everybody in general should listen to this podcast because holy shit, this is going to be a mind-altering experience for a lot of people because they've never thought of it this way. And what are we doing? We're giving people perspective.
I love it.
Perspective on perspective. And we're giving people perspective on what solutioning means. So I think that's awesome. So Bryan, I want to thank you for doing this with me because I think this is going to benefit so many people.
Well, I appreciate having me on, Rob. This has been a blast. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, for sure. So everybody, please, this is Bryan Whittington. He is a fantastic guy. He's with EBS Growth. Definitely contact him. His LinkedIn is going to be in the description. So you feel free to connect with him on there. My LinkedIn is also in the description. And if you want to ever set up a solutioning session with me or Bryan, if you want to set up a consultation with me or Bryan, we're always available and there will be links for that as well. This podcast is brought to you by White Rabbit Intel. It's sales enablement AI that enables sales and marketing teams to know more, win more, and close often. So check that out. It's pretty badass. It's the future of selling as we know it. Beyond that, please follow this podcast. It's on Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, you name it, pretty much everything, including iHeartRadio. And please use the hashtag if you're going to mention it, share it, whatever else, with hashtag DTRH podcast and hashtag sales enablement. So again, Bryan, it was a pleasure to have you on here. And if you want to follow Bryan's hashtag, then get after it. Hashtag get after it. So I think that's pretty awesome. And why not get after it? Isn't that what everybody wants? So thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And again, we'll be tuning in next week. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Down the Rabbit Hole podcast for new episodes weekly on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, and YouTube. If you'd like to apply to be featured on the podcast or recommend a featured guest, please feel free to email us at theteam@whiterabbitintel.com.